Welcome back to The Art of Actual Change. I'm your host, Derek Nielsen, former health specialist turned wildlife, conservation, fine art photographer. Through my many travels around the world, I've met some people who are doing some fascinating work outside themselves to make this planet a better place to live. Each episode, I'll be bringing you these people, letting them tell their stories, and hopefully you'll find inspiration in these stories so that you can go out and make an actual change in your world or the world around you. Hi guys, welcome back to The Art of Actual Change. Today's going to be a very different episode. I am going to be telling you a little bit about myself. I'm not doing an interview. I am going to be answering some questions that some of you posted on social media. Thanks for following along on there. I'm going to be giving you an insight on what it's like to be a wildlife photographer, nature photographer in general, why conservation has become such a passionate issue for me, and why it should be for you as well. I'm also going to be talking about just how I got started in the whole business and travel and just things I've learned from other people, things I've learned about myself, and things that I'm really proud of. So enjoy. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to The Art of Actual Change. I am your host, Derek Nielsen. And today we're going to be doing a very different episode, something that I haven't done before. This is not an interview, but more of giving you my background, my story, talk about my life, how I got involved in this. We'll talk about travel, all the good things that are to come and that are all about me. So I also put out there on Instagram that I wanted you guys to come up with some questions. You guys came up with some great ones. I'll answer those in the middle somewhere. But right now we're going to dive into me and why I'm so passionate about conservation and why you should be as well. But what it all started was I grew up in a small town in Illinois. The town's called Gilbert's. It's about an hour outside of Chicago Northwest. And when I was growing up, it was pretty much the edge of civilization. Didn't have a lot of people living out that direction. My schools were relatively small until I went to high school. Then I had a bigger high school experience. And I spent a lot of time roaming around my backyard, which was a swamp or a wetland. There was a pond, and some of the kids in my neighborhood, we'd go down there and chase frogs and snakes. And I spent a lot of my childhood in that back swampy area of my neighborhood, really. And I developed a certain love and a skill set for being in the outdoors. I learned how to handle animals, things that weren't people's favorites. Like I loved catching snakes. I don't anymore because I don't love handling animals in general, unless it's my dog Dosie. But what it did teach me was how to find them, how to pick different irregularities in something like algae and look for frogs' eyes that were sticking above the surface just ever so slightly, which looked like the rest of the bubbles across the algae. But I could pick out which ones were the frog eyes and then go and catch the frog. I spent a lot of time catching and releasing frogs. There was nothing I did with them but observe them, look at them, check them out for whatever cool features they had, and then just release them back into the wetlands. So that was kind of my introduction to wildlife. And my parents were really influential in the fact that they just kind of let me go. Like if I had a bucket full of snakes that I brought home, they'd just be like, oh my gosh, you're crazy and cute, but can you go return them now? But they never discouraged me from doing that sort of thing. They didn't say, don't fill the bucket up with snakes, just please release them far enough away from the house where they don't come in. And my grandfather on my mother's side, he was an Eagle Scout, and he took her camping, and in return, she took my brother and I camping. And my dad was always really into the outdoors as well. So that worked out really, really great for me growing up, because I got to spend a lot of time outside in nature, playing with friends or getting together with their group of friends, and all the things that we used to do were typically outdoors and camping. I was in the Boy Scouts for a little while, so I got some kind of introduction to outdoor skills, even though it didn't last very long for me because I'm not one who's all that great at following rules, as a lot of you may know. But what that did was it created a lifelong love of nature. And even when I was in high school and when I was going into college, I always found peace out in nature. It was a place that I could connect and decompress, and the stresses of college and the stresses of, just being a teenager and trying to fit in and all the things that come along with the early childhood development and whatever. Nature was always home. It was a place, like I said, I could just go out there for a few hours and my blood pressure would drop. And I knew that that was going to be a place where I was going to be spending a lot of my time. Now, did I know it was going to lead me to become a conservation nature photographer? No, but I did know that I wanted to spend more and more time outside. And so when I went to college, I studied biology because I didn't quite know what I wanted to be or do when I was growing up. I had this idea of becoming a doctor, but I didn't really like the idea of being a surgeon. And so I chose biology. And while I was studying biology at Western Michigan, I learned a lot about things that just in nature in general, like how the forest works, how to classify species of animals. And the deeper I got into it, the more I liked, but I also realized that wasn't going to be my path. I wasn't going to become a biologist. There was something else that I liked. So I picked up human movement. And for a while, for a long while, I made a career out of it, was a personal trainer in kind of the elite advanced, like special populations level, kind of like what a physical therapist does, but not the same skill set or the same amount of schooling. But I would work with some really advanced patients, people who had strokes or were fresh out of rehabilitation. I would take over, but they weren't quite ready to go back to the gym because they still had some things they had to work on. Some people call it corrective exercise. That's where I spent a majority of my career. But when it comes to what I'm doing now and what you're probably interested in, is that I got really involved with photography, and totally by accident. I was working a job that I will answer later. Might as well answer it now. Someone asked me, what was my worst job ever? Well, this was my worst job ever. I was working at a place that booked online tee times for golf courses all over the world. And don't get me wrong, I love golfers. They can come across as a little bit rude, especially when you aren't at the golf course. They're expecting to talk to the pro shop. And when you answer and you're in Chicago and they're trying to reach somebody in Arizona, they're not happy that they're talking to you. And I'm sure you've experienced this other times as well, when you call up some sort of customer service thing and you're talking to someone in a different state or a different country. It's not the same expectation, I guess, or whatever you're looking for. So anyway, I'm working at this job. I can't stand it. And I really wanted something to do during my breaks. And I didn't want to just go outside and sit with all the traders, because at the time it was right around the board of trade, and I'd go outside and there'd be all these traders out there chain smoking cigarettes before they had to go back in and do more of whatever the heck traders do. And so I bought a $100 film camera. It was an old Canon Rebel X. I actually have it sitting behind me. But if you listen to the podcast, you can't see it. And I learned quickly how to, well, first work the camera. It's very complicated. Have you ever picked up a camera, and especially with film, and you can't instantly see what you're doing? You don't quite know what aperture is, what the effects of shutter speed are. So I started really diving into this. I'm like, I like this, but I knew that it was very complicated. So, and because I was working this terrible job that didn't pay well, and I was in college and didn't have a lot of money at all, I I couldn't just buy rolls and rolls and rolls of film, because when you would do that, it would be pretty expensive. And I started to buy a nicer film. I shot slide film. And then you had this production costs where you would go and take, I'm like lecturing to people as like, this is how it used to be. But you would take this roll of film and you had no idea what was on it, because you didn't have that instant gratification, or you couldn't review it right away. And you take it in and they would give you back a roll of slides, or just pictures if it was on a normal film roll. And I would just fall in love with the images that I was capturing. Or I would totally blow out a whole roll of film that was overexposed, and I would get all these slides that were like pretty much completely clear, because I just had overexposed the whole thing and it was a total waste. So I didn't want to keep doing that. So I had to quickly learn why I had overexposed that one particular roll. And so that's really how I got into photography. It was out of pure boredom at a job that I hated. So I'd carry my camera around on my lunch breaks, and I would have a quick lunch, and I would go look for different patterns in the architecture in the city of Chicago. And if you know anything about Chicago, it is really known, and it has some great, beautiful architecture. There's some pretty significant buildings that we have here. So that's what I would do. I would look for little bits of irregularities in the shadows underneath the L, and look for moody scenes. And I began compiling this early portfolio that I would often carry around with me and show people. And I was so excited with what I was doing. And my friends and family were really kind enough to not discourage me when, even though I look back at some of that work and it was as amateur as it could have been. Rightly so. I was just learning, but they gave me a lot of good feedback, and I was able to just keep pursuing that dream. I had a family friend, his name is Robert Kelly, and he was and is a professional photographer, and he definitely guided me along the way. He was a huge influence in me beginning out in photography. He talked about the importance of light, and something called sweet light that he loves to say. And now I understand exactly what he's talking about. It's a certain time of day, morning and evening, where the colors just get so saturated and beautiful when you have a really good sunset. And he taught me an interesting lesson when everybody's pointing their cameras at a beautiful sunset, to point it away, because the light is going to be really good. And it's something that I like to do when I'm out at the end of a day on safari, or if I'm on a mountaintop in Patagonia or something. Like, yes, I like to photograph the sunset, but if you turn the camera around, the light that's being cast on the landscape or the animals is often spectacular. So Bob Kelly was a huge influence in my early photography life. And I just continued on with it, and I would pick the camera up, put the camera down. For a while there, I probably set it down more than I would have liked to. But then I met a girl, and we started traveling, and we spent 6 months in South America. And at this point, we'd been dating for a while, and I bought a digital camera, which was great, because then I could see exactly what I was shooting, if I liked it or not. The camera, this was probably back in, like, I don't even know the date, but I was shooting with the Canon 40D. It had just come out, and I had two lenses with me, a 70 to 200 and a 24-105, I think, came with the camera. And so I think I had a point and shoot as well. And so I was really excited to go spend 6 months traveling around South America. And that is the moment that I really deeply fell in love with photography. When I was down in South America, this is really the first time I'd ever been far from home. Left the country a few times, but it were all remote things like Mexico or the Bahamas. I was far from home. And having this digital camera, and at the time, a load of memory cards and hard drives and things that were, the cameras weren't shooting that powerful of images at the time. So I could really store a lot of photos on a hard drive. But I would go around and I'd photograph these new scenes, these new people, these new friends in a world that I had never been a part of before. And I couldn't get enough of it. I really love travel photography. I could photograph any new town with beautiful old Spanish churches, the same way I would go on a mountaintop in, like, again, in Patagonia or middle Chile or somewhere up in the Peruvian Andes. And I had that same excitement. It was just as exciting to photograph an old church in a town that was just dripping with charm as a place that was just raw beauty, or even in the Amazon, photographing wildlife. And at that time, I wasn't huge into photographing wildlife. It was very challenging. Wildlife is a different skill set, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But I knew then this was something that I was very passionate about. And I didn't quite know I was going to make a career out of it yet, but I did know that I was falling deeper and deeper in love with photography. So that's how I got started in photography. And it wasn't something that I have ever taken classes for. A lot of it's been trial and error. I read a lot of books. I study other great photographers. I was just at a gallery event with Paul Nicklin and Christina Mittermer. And if you know anything about those two, they are two of the most talented and kind and friendly people in photography. They're wildly successful, but they don't show it. Their hearts are huge, and we're very supportive of just having conversations with me. And so, yeah, I don't know how I got to start talking on that, but anyway, yeah, studying other photographers like those guys. So I was not always determined to be a wildlife photographer. That is something that has come over time. After traveling now to all 7 continents in 2016, I believe it was, I was in Rwanda. And I think this is the moment when I realized that I had already decided that I wanted to be a professional photographer, but I really didn't know quite what that meant. And so when I was in Rwanda, I was so fortunate enough to spend some time with the silverback gorillas. And if you've ever dreamt of doing that, I highly recommend doing it. It is still to this day the most impactful and powerful wildlife experience I've ever had a pleasure to witness. And I've seen a lot now. The dominant silverback of the group, we got 1 hour with them, 2 days in a row. So that was all we had. But the dominant silverback of the group in our first visit came up and pretty much put his face in mine, where I had to look down, and there was no cage. There was nothing protecting me from this massive gorilla. And it was so thrilling. It was such a beautiful moment to be that close to an animal that could just wipe me off the face of the earth with one swipe of his hands. And afterwards, once he approved of all of our presence in the area, he went and relaxed. And then the whole family came out. It was so beautiful. I still get choked up just reminiscing about that experience with that family. Little babies were coming up and playing with our shoelaces, and mothers brought out their infants and were nursing them, and the little juveniles as well were tackling each other and fighting. And this whole thing just went on for an hour. I will go back at some point, because like many other photography situations I've been in, sometimes your nerves get the best of you, and you know you only have an hour with these guys. And so I was just firing off as many things as I could. The lighting, it's in a forest, so it makes it challenging. You're shooting black subjects, which are also challenging. Autofocus and back then wasn't as good as it is now. So half of my images weren't as sharp as I'd like them to be. And it was just a really intense, beautiful experience. And that was the point when I realized that not only did I want to be a nature photographer, but I really wanted to focus in on the wildlife portion of it. Later on in that trip, went on to Tanzania, and I got to see, elephants and giraffes and the beautiful animals of the Serengeti and Tarangire National Park. And I learned a lot about conservation on that trip. I'd already seen some of the destruction that the planet was going under. When on my trips down to Patagonia, on that early trip in for the 6 months that I was down there, but also in Iceland, there's this really beautiful glacial, I guess it's a black sand beach, but I think it's Joe Carlson, and I can never pronounce any of the words in Icelandic, but I think it's Joe Carlson Beach. It's on the south side of Iceland. This massive ice cap comes reaching down, touches pretty much the ocean, and in between is this just stunning glacial lagoon and a black sand beach. When you're standing where the bridge is, separating the two parts of the beach where the water is flowing from the lagoon out to the ocean, you're hit with the scale of melt that is taking place on that ice cap, and it is flowing directly out to the ocean. And for me, seeing that, feeling the rush of water, the continual rush of water, I'm talking, it's a river. It's not just a stream. It is, I don't know the cubic amount of water that's being pushed through there, but it is, it's intense. And to know that that's happening all day, all night, 365 days a year, was the first time that I also wanted to get involved with the conservation side of things. And so I knew that the planet was in a rough shape, and this is years ago. Things have picked up since then, unfortunately. But that trip to Iceland solidified with my background knowledge of what I had seen down in Patagonia. And now I'm spending this time with these beautiful animals in Africa, learning about them, seeing the struggles that they're undertaking, hearing the terrible stories about poaching, and just interaction with people made me realize that I had to do something. I felt like then I had to step up, and I could no longer just travel the world taking pretty pictures. I felt that I could do more. I felt like I could give back. And somewhere shortly after that, I decided that I wanted to have my photographs, my artwork, benefit environmental organizations around the world. And what I wanted to do was to travel to all 7 continents, which I've now done that, and choose organizations in each of the places that represent the animals or landscape or even people that I've come across. And so that is how I really started Derek Nielsen Photography. And the organizations that I work with now are, they're incredible. One of the questions, and we'll dive into some of them now, is what are some of the direct impacts that I've been able to help support in my work? There is a great organization called Sea Shepherd that I support through my Antarctic photography. They go around and protect our oceans, mostly in the South, where whaling is still very prevalent, especially with the Japanese whaling vessels, and others. There was I just saw today actually on Instagram that there was a European vessel that was tuna fishing, and there was 2 whales caught in the nets, and the whaling vessel didn't release the catch to release the whales, the very threatened humpbacks, and endangered. It instead kept pulling it in until the 2 big whales got squeezed out, which Sea Shepherd was there to document it. And so some of my work has gone back towards helping Sea Shepherd, and I don't know exactly if there's any particular program or agenda that I've helped, but knowing that my work has gone back to protecting whales through them is enough when it comes to an organization like that. One of the big ones that we're working with now, especially in Africa, and I'm really excited because I just got back from 3 weeks in Africa, is Dr. Gabby Wild. She and I have formed a friendship, and her work, so when I donate money to her, her work goes towards funding other trips where she can go and protect and do veterinary work on animals in need, wild animals across Africa. And she does a lot of stuff domestically as well. But I'm very proud to know that when I make a donation to Dr. Amber Wild, it is going back towards helping her continue her veterinary work, and saving wild animals. So that's kind of how I picked all my organizations. I work with the Global Philanthropy Alliance. Any photographs I take of cultural things around the world goes back to helping them. They primarily work in Africa. So yeah, that's kind of my business model, is set up to help out people who are working very hard in the places that I do my photography. Like out west, the Conservation Alliance is a big one out there. And all my work that I did photographing wildlife and landscapes in the Grand Tetons and Zion National Park and Bryce Canyon will go toward benefiting them. And that it's because they spend a lot of time doing conservation campaigns, helping save bears' ears, helping fight the pebble mine, all these sort of things out west. So they're really driven across the United States, but a lot of their work is done out west. And I wanted my work to be sold to help an organization like that is doing great things. And so here at Derek Nielsen Photography, that's me, I donate at least 10%, sometimes more, to organizations, depending on what our agreement is and how much I'm selling for them. But it's crucial. I need to give back. These organizations need our help. I felt that the world didn't need another conservation organization, but the ones that are out there, they need money, and they need money to continue the work, because our planet absolutely is in jeopardy. And I hate to be the one of doom and gloom and say that, but if we don't act, after seeing the things that I've seen with my own two eyes, we're going to be in some serious trouble. So anyway, so back to some of the questions that you guys have proposed and asked me. Let's see. Was I always determined to be a wildlife photographer? I think I talked about that. No, I was not. I just like taking pretty pictures, and my journey has led me to down an interesting path. But I love animals, and so getting to spend time with them is pretty much the happiest place that I can be on earth. And so I'm drawn to the animals, and since then I've been able to produce some pretty cool images of wildlife that I'm very proud of. What would I recommend getting, or where would I recommend going for the best safari experience while preserving nature? Well, I've only been to one country on safari, but I know a lot about other experiences you can have. And what I would say is, no matter where you go in the world, make sure your safari company or a travel agent is somebody who practices ethical wildlife watching. And there is going to be a carbon footprint when you travel, and that is something that I'd like to work on more myself. But while you're there, you do have a choice whether to work with an organization that is environmentally conscious. Are they putting you in lodges that are using solar energy or wind power? Are they, there's a lot of different ways you can pick your locations that you're going. And oftentimes, but not always, the places that I've found that I end up staying at are environmentally conscious. And so just make sure, if you're out there and you have the choice and you're searching and looking for an organization, a company to stay at a lodge with, to go on safari with, to make sure they're letting you reuse your towels, that sort of thing, and taking care of the planet. And then while on safari, make sure that your guide is also has ethical wildlife practices. And what I mean by that is that they're not whistling to the animal to get their attention, and they're just letting them be. You're there to be an observer. You're not there to be someone who interacts with the animals. If you want that, you go to a petting zoo. Out on safari, there's a real danger to interacting with animals, whether it's a safari here in the United States. If you're out in Yellowstone, you don't get out of your car and play with the bison. It can severely hurt you, if not kill you. And so, yeah, make sure you're with a guide who is an observer, who knows the behavior of the animals, and shows them a lot of respect, because that is when you get the most out of the experience. And then you leave no trace, beyond leaving footprints and things like that. The pack in, pack out mentality, not only with garbage, should also be with our presence. You don't want to create a condition. You don't want to create a learned behavior for the animals for the next visitor. You don't want to have any of that. And so that's what I recommend when it comes to safari experience. I'm going to skip that one and come back to it. It was how do I adopt Dosie? But let's see. What do I find most difficult about photographing animals in the wild? They don't have an agenda. They don't have a plan. They are so random. It's what I find difficult. I find difficult having patience. I am a very patient person, and even wildlife challenges that. I've sat for days looking for grizzly bears in the Yellowstone Teton area for no luck. I mean, I would have just hours of sitting and searching and just missing, and it really gets to push your your morale. And so, yeah, showing patience is by far one of the most difficult things about photographing wild animals. If you do your research and you understand their behavior, you understand what they like to eat, where they like to sleep, and a time of year, where do they like to spend their time? They like to be, like moose are a great example. In summer, they act very different than wintertime. So in the summer months, you're going to be gravitating towards the forest and towards the swampy areas where they can keep cool. And in the wintertime, it's quite opposite, because they want to be in the open a little bit, and so they can run from predators if they need to. And it's just very, if you know the animals, then you'll find them eventually. So, all right, what was my interaction with people, and what have I learned from them, and what surprised me? So all around the world, I have gradually learned a lot about myself through my own interactions with people. And I'll take a step back with that. Every place that I've ever been, and I've been really fortunate to hit all, like I said, all 7 continents, the people were incredibly welcoming, friendly, kind, outgoing. I made myself vulnerable to them and showed them respect, and that I wanted their hospitality. And because of my openness with these people, and I was very shy at the beginning. Like I was only 25 years old when I started traveling abroad and doing these sort of things. I'm 38 now, which is still young on many fronts, but I was shy, and I made myself kind of put myself out of the comfort zone. I just talk to people, interact people, go out with a stranger and have a meal, go dancing in a club with some people you just met in a hostel, try new foods, try new experiences. One of the first experiences I had with eating strange foods was I was in Uruguay with 2 brothers that they owned a hostel, and when the mealtime came around, we were sitting, hanging out all day together. We really formed a good friendship. We were cooking this gorgeous fish. And when mealtime came around, because I was the male guest of our situation, I was the honored recipient of the fish head. So they chopped off the fish head and they gave that to me on a plate with some rice and some things. And I was kind of taken aback by that. I didn't quite understand why I was presented the fish head. I didn't know even how to begin, how to eat a fish head. And so they were laughing, but that was my meal. That was my meal for the night. I had to eat the eyeballs. They taught me how to eat the cheek, dig around on the inside. It's not something that I crave or look forward to going back to, but I gave it a shot. I accepted their offering. And because I did that, we had a great night. I mean, I still remember that as one of my favorite travel memories. And I've had some more recent, very similar. And so as I've gone to Iceland, to Borneo, to Hong Kong, Africa twice now, the Philippines, or not the Philippines, I haven't been there yet, Thailand, Cambodia, every single place I've gone, I've opened myself up to learning from the people. I've opened myself up to new experiences, and I set all judgments aside. I've photographed some really rough stuff that when I don't even show people at home, because I show close people, but I don't want these images opening up or ending up on social media, because I don't want some of the things in our society to judge what I'm seeing, and whether it's the strange things that people are wearing, eating, some of the tribal practices that I know would not be seen as. I'm dancing around something right now, but I photographed a child my last trip to Africa that was smoking a cigarette. A baby. I mean, we're talking like maybe under 3 years of. I don't even know how old she was. And I have a hard time with that image. And I know that I could never post it on social media. I know that I can never print it for sale, because it shouldn't be sold, but it's a documented image that I have, and I will show people and educate them on the experience, the culture. I don't judge them. I don't judge the parents. It was a tribe. How could I judge a tribe? I don't even know where they come from. I don't know their traditions and beliefs and such. So what I've learned a lot about people throughout my time traveling is just acceptance and understanding, and to constantly learn that I am a minority in their environment as they would be a minority in my environment, and none of it matters. All that matters is that I'm learning from them, and that maybe I can share with them something that's interesting, show them respect, show them kindness as they're showing me. And I think what I've learned most about humans and people is exactly that: how to be a human being, how to care, show empathy. And yeah, it's the best part of travel. The wildlife stuff is close, but the human interaction and the learning from different cultures and bringing some of it home is where it's at. That is the best part to me. And I often have a hard time when I come back home. Like this past trip, three weeks in Africa, I needed like a solid week to decompress and come back to what's like normal society. People with problems that seem so trivial after I'd been to Africa. And I don't mean to minimize other people's problems, but like I had a hard time comparing the two. That like, wow, okay, your kid swore at you and you're upset about it or whatever. I just made that up. But like, and here I'm like watching this other scene happening with like a smoking baby, and I'm like, well, okay, that's intense. Like, at least your 3-year-old's not smoking cigarettes. Like, I can't just yell at them and tell them that. Like, I don't even know if that's bad. I mean, whatever. But anyway, I'm kind of rambling on now, but it is my greatest thing that I've learned from people is just how to be a better human myself. And where that has come from as well is that over the last, I don't know, it's 3 years now, I've been dealing with my own traumas and things. And this is something that I wanted to talk about on this podcast because I want people to know the real me, the genuineness that I bring to my photography, my podcast, my YouTube channel, my conversations with you. If you meet me and see me in person, know that I'm bringing the authentic me. Okay. And that I will always try to do that for you. I was in my own home in Little Italy, where I was living in Chicago, and I had let myself go, and I was having fun with 2 neighbors of ours, and I let myself get too drunk, and I lost control of my body. And many of us have been there. I didn't have control of the night, and what ended up happening was these 2 cowards decided to sexually assault me. And they're gay men. I have nothing against the gay community. It has nothing to do with that. They took an opportunity as sexual predators, and they sexually assaulted me in my own home. And that one, it took a long time to get. I still, think about it, but I've done a lot of work to know that one of them is most likely a psychopathic sociopath, and the other one is just too big of a coward to realize what he was doing in a situation that was completely wrong. He didn't do anything to defend me. And I've had a lot of work with a therapist. And in the end of the day, what it comes down to is that experience made me a stronger person and someone who could dive deep into my own masculinity and my own emotions and deal with the things that I've been dealing with. Whereas prior, I had just been bottling a lot of that stuff up. I had been, a lot of us sweep things under the rug and put on this mask of everything's okay. The perfect life. A lot of people are envious of the way I live my life, and I appreciate that. And I'm envious of them in other ways. But what I've, especially after being attacked, was that I realized that a lot of us are dealing with something. We're all dealing with, whether it's traumas, relationship issues, and there's this saying out there, it's okay to not be okay. I feel like that. I have these times where I'm kind of like just checked out, where I used to, not as much anymore, because I've done some really great work in therapy, and I highly recommend every person on earth should go see a therapist and talk to someone. It's just nice to have someone who's trained, professional, help you with the things that we deal with. Like, life is complicated. Life is sticky. Life is challenging. And I have had a few traumas in my life. I was actually sexually assaulted as a child when I was being babysat, and that's a really young age. And both of those 2 experiences I've now worked through, and I'm good with it. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not afraid of telling people that. Obviously, here I am wanting to be a voice of a man who has gone through this process. I mean, the statistics are that 1 in 6 males in their life will be sexually assaulted. That is mind blowing. There's over 40 million men, they say, in the world who have been sexually assaulted one way or another. And those statistics, the 1 in 6, are often thought of as low because a lot of us guys don't want to talk about it. And you don't have to. I'm not telling you have to. I'm just telling you that if you go through that process, you're not alone. Go find someone to talk to. Go find a therapist. You can reach out to someone like myself. I'm not trained, but I will definitely listen. We can talk about some things. And even if you're not a male, if you're a woman who's dealt with some stuff, like, feel free to reach out to someone. We all have something going on, and it's really important to not bottle it up, not sweep it under the rug, to open yourself up to people, talk to people about what has happened in your life. And by me doing this with my family and with my closest friends, what it actually has done is made my relationships with them so much stronger. Like, I can't even tell you how much stronger my relationships are with the people that I felt the courage to tell them about it, or that I was ready to talk to them about it. I was afraid at first, like, they're going to judge me, but the more I worked through my own therapies, the more I realized that I had nothing to be ashamed of. It wasn't me that did anything. And then I was able to tell my family, a few close friends, and again, those relationships now are so solid, and even more so than before. And so, wow, that's some of the deep stuff that I wanted to get out there. And just, not that I want to talk about it a lot on my podcast, but if something comes up that somebody wants to talk about, like, I want to be able to be vulnerable with my guests. I want to be able to talk about anything. And I feel like it's important for all of us to just listen to one another, treat each other with kindness, um, accept one another for who we are. Because, like, again, this is just one big sticky life that we get to live. And the more we open up and deal with the stuff that we're working on, it just makes everything a lot easier. And now I travel with an open heart and an open conscience, and a lot of it, it's just an exciting time. So going forward, if you're a guest on my podcast coming up, feel free to talk about anything. If you are just somebody who's listening in and you want to shoot me a note, an email, it doesn't have to be a one-on-one conversation. Feel free. We're all in here. We're all going to be doing this together. So the last thing I will talk about before I head out on this podcast about myself is, where did I adopt Dosie? Kelly and I adopted Dosie at the Anti-Cruelty Society. She is she's one of those dogs that, like, you hear who adopted who, or who rescued who, I should say. That's the saying. Dosie is a super big sweetheart. She was 6 months old and was a dog who had been through a lot of trauma herself. And she's helped me through a lot of things. Obviously, I just told you guys about a lot of things, but so Dosie came from the Anti-Cruelty Society. She is an avid outdoor lover and someone that brings me a ton of joy. And so I hope you all got a lot out of this podcast. There's some heavy stuff that we talked about, but there's also some really great things that we talked about photography. If you have any questions about photography in general, and if you're looking to do some travel, just reach out to me. I'd be glad to. On Instagram, Derek Nielsen Photography. On Facebook, same thing, Derek Nielsen Photography. Or you go to my website, dereknielsen.com. Check out all of those and just send me a message. I'd be glad to give you some pointers on travel. I've written a few articles on photography, but if there's something on there that wasn't covered, or maybe you just want to dive a little bit more in depth, and please shoot me an email, and I'd be glad to talk to you guys about more photography stuff. So, all right, you know what time it is. Go out there and make an actual change in your life or the world around you.